So I think we can officially start this session, wonderful session. And in fact, I was engaged in another demo session that we are going to have day after tomorrow. That's the reason that I took a little time of 1 minute late I am. So, okay.
Absolutely.
So on behalf of United World School of Law, I, Professor Dr. Debarati Haldar, I warmly welcome you, sir. So just let us, let me give a very brief introduction. I mean, even though this introduction is very brief, but I understand it is a very heavy introduction about Advocate Deepak Dayal. Even though, sir, you need not have any introduction from our side, but still then, it is for all our students and also about for our audience also. Advocate Dayal is the managing partner at Dayal Associates and Secretary General of the Society for Legal Reforms and Education. He is also a senior legal advisor for the legal industry in India, Middle East and South Asia, and has a rich working experience with Indian as well as international clients on matters of corporate and personal law. His objective is to mentor law students, giving them exposure which they may otherwise not get in their law colleges, have industry experts on board to help practitioners grow in their career, and educate every individual with the latest legal knowledge there. So that is the most important thing. With this, we start the session, sir. I will not take much of your time, but I'm really interested that, you know, the way you will go ahead with the session, because what I just got to see that since I was also in a, like, as I said, the demo webinar, and even there also somebody started telling that, yes, there are some, you know, malicious viruses, etc. They are cropping up. So as you stated, sir, this is very, very much important for your session, and also to understand that how to go ahead in the legal, profession as a lawyer and also as an educator, sir. We welcome you warmly in this session, sir. The stage is yours, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haldar. I'm not sure if I deserve this great appreciation, but thank you so much. And I do not have a PhD degree, so you don't have to call me sir. I have to give you higher respect. You are a PhD qualified person, much higher than me. But okay, my point is that whatever, and I've spent, just to give you a little background, I've spent about 15 years overseas, okay, in the Middle East and in the Far East. Singapore, Dubai is where my stronghold has been. And I've done some assignments in the US and Canada and Australia as well. So I come in across myself, I tell people that I'm a business lawyer. And I've also done my MBA, and I've worked in the industry, the banking and financial services industry from the corporate side. So I've been on like an in-house counsel also, got my law firm experience, and a little bit I've been from the client side also, where we were used to hire law firms and lawyers to get our jobs done. So my main point, obviously we're going to start off, we have a very crisp and interesting topic, which is drafting of commercial agreements, a special focus on force majeure clause, which is of critical importance, and it is impacting every company, not just in India, but across the world, right? But point which I will focus on is that everything which I do, and I, yes, mentor a lot of students, and I'll be more than happy to take as many students who are in this forum or within your college to give them mentorship. And also, I cannot commit to internships and job offers, but I will reach out as much as possible within my circle of colleagues and friends to help students. I know these are very, very difficult times, and just the placement centers and colleges may not be able to do everything which they wanted to do. But again, coming back to the point, whatever I'm going to talk today will be from a very practical point of view. I do not believe in bookish knowledge and theoretical knowledge, because I look at it, everything that we are there to support our clients. Okay. So first of all, we must understand the business of our clients, and where a lot of lawyers fail, when I say fail, meaning they might not be able to do a great job, is when they do not understand their clients' businesses. What we try to do is we make agreements. Okay, now please understand what is happening. I've been in this industry for about 30 years now, and I see a big shift in the last 5 years. The shift is that we have artificial intelligence coming in. Okay, we must understand, gone are those days, especially on the corporate side, where clients would pay large amounts of money to law firms and fancy lawyers for making simple basic agreements. Okay, now we have technology with us, we have templates with us, very good templates. The best of lawyers and law firms use those templates. Okay, so as lawyers, where are we adding value? What is it that a computer or a robot can do, or an artificial intelligence program can manage, which where are we adding value to these things? So we must always be looking at it. It's gone are those days where, clients are also very smart these days. Everybody's trying to also kind of save cost if possible. Okay, so we must look at adding real value to whatever work we do, whether we are part of a law firm or an individual lawyer. Yes, litigation will always require a lot of individuals speaking in front of the honorable judges. But on the corporate side, there is a big shift happening. And if you want to get onto the corporate side, you have to be better than the best. Okay, please understand. So a lot of people want to get into corporates, but idea is that you really, really need to be very, very, very good. Couple of things which are important is soft skills, very critical. I will understand, and I will assume that all of you will understand basic contract law. It's a given. Okay, we will cover it very briefly, but in a short 45-minute session, I will assume that you have gone over basic contract law. But what you need to fully understand today is that your communication skills should be good. Okay, if you want to do corporate, it's not about learning Hindi or English. Okay, and I tell all young lawyers that communication skills have to be good. Now, it could be in English, Hindi, Gujarati, Malayalam, whatever your native language is. But if you are getting into litigation, it's a different thing. But on the corporate side, nearly all our contracts are still being made in English. Yes, we have real estate contracts and many others which are in local languages. So language skills are very, very critical. Okay. So understanding, and a lot of students have been asking me what area to specialize in, and I tell them it is not what area is good or bad. There is no good and bad area in law. It is what is most suitable for you. Are you cut out for litigation? Are you cut out for criminal or civil? Are you cut out for corporate, M&A? Are you cut out for drafting? That is based on your personality type and what interests you more. Okay, so I'll jump straight into very quickly. I've just, this is a book which I have come out with. It's based on all the experiences for the last, it took me about 12 years to come up with this book. Okay, although I have soft copies of this, it's just that the idea behind this book is that it is in very simple language. Okay, and I will give you more information, and we'll through Yashvi and through Dr. Holder, we will make sure you get all my presentations, and so you can take your pace. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to connect with the law students, and join the mentorship program on SFLRE website, simple form, fill it up, and you'll automatically be invited for our mentorship sessions. We are also getting in HR managers, like we had the HR director of PepsiCo join in a couple of weeks back. EY. So these are large recruiters also, and they will also tell you what they look for in students when they have to hire. And you will also we will try to connect you directly to them also. So mentorship program is actually designed for you to help you in your next 30 years or 40 years in your career. So those are a couple of things which we need to keep in mind. I'm also going to rely on some other information, and I will share this with you. See, yes, we are Indian law students. We are looking at Indian Contract Act, but today we are in a very global environment. Okay, please understand that just studying, if you want to go to the next level and show that you are more capable than the other law students, we also look at this is about international business law. I've been teaching these programs in Dubai and Singapore also, and I will make sure that you get these availability of the books, or the soft copies of these books are available. We'll make sure, because my focus is not just on Indian law. We are talking about clients, and we are all talking about global clients now. Okay, so yes, Contract Act is very important, but if you look at it, today's nearly every business is become a global business. It could be an Indian company, but an Indian company is also exporting, is also importing. So there is a cross-border component with it. The shareholders of those companies could be overseas, directors could be overseas, or customers could be overseas, right? And when we talk about drafting of commercial agreements, we are also focusing, so in my book also and otherwise also, I think what is normally not covered in law schools, which I have seen, is that we do not talk about cross-border agreements. We do not talk about specifically about joint ventures. We don't give enough weightage to M&A activities, mergers and acquisitions, contracts. Startups and businesses, critical today. In fact, I'm encouraging a lot of law students, and in fact, a couple of them, very interesting story. You can't practice, you cannot go to a law court today, but informally, you should start engaging with friends, family, outer circle, understanding their legal requirements, and to the best of your ability, guiding people. And there are good lawyers like, I can introduce you to other colleagues as well as me. If you have anybody who really wants some assistance, we'll be happy to guide you. And you can start building up your client base from now itself. I have students in Chennai who within their friends community, somebody was starting a startup and they wanted help. I said, okay, you engage with them, we'll guide you. And he actually, just charged 10,000 rupees, but was able to, we gave them templates, we gave them soft copies. And so don't look to wait that once you get your degrees, then you'll be ready as a lawyer. I think understanding law, it's a process which is already getting started. Okay, let's start. We'll go to the slide. Can you switch on the slides, please? So I have two sections in PowerPoint presentation. One is a short one. The other is a very detailed one. So we go through the shorter one, and also then we will focus on the force majeure clause, which is because of COVID-19, every contract today globally in India is being affected. Okay, and we'll also go through. So although most of you have done Contract Act, and I'm assuming have done basic understanding of contract law, but we'll just quickly go through in about 10 minutes or so. And then we'll start, and I would also want to take on some case studies and real cases, which should have a major impact. At any point in time, anybody wants to kind of stop me to ask questions, Yashvi, you can indicate, and Dr. Holder, you can stop me at any point in time if required. Please switch on her mic also. So, in case you want to say something, you can always, speak up at any point in time. Yeah. So drafting of commercial contracts, what we'll do is we'll quickly go over these slides one by one. There are not too many slides, but we'll give you a basic understanding. Yeah, can you, Neeraj and Parth, can you go to this? Yeah. Okay, this is just about the book, but why it is important? The contents are critical. I've used very simple language, okay? And simplicity today, 15 years back, we as lawyers used to use very complicated language, okay? It was somehow in our DNA to use words which would confuse everybody. Last 5, 7, 10 years back, globally, it has shifted to start using simple language. Don't use Latin phrases. There is no need to use Shakespearean English. Okay, we are making contracts as if a 10th standard student should be able to understand it. Okay, so simplicity is at the core of a good contract today. And unnecessarily, we as lawyers are responsible for making contracts which were for 300 pages. A shareholder agreement sometimes could run into 300 pages. But we feel that there is no need to unnecessarily elaborate on something if you can put it in the shortest possible words. Okay, yeah. Can we go on to the other slides, please? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just skip these, please. Yeah. So let's look at a very, very basic understanding for the contract itself. And yeah, the contract is a legally binding agreement. That is an agreement which will be enforced by the courts. An agreement created and defining obligations between parties. So what I am using is actually international language for contracts. Okay. Yes, when it comes to India, our Bible is the Contract Act, and you'll also realize that so many times we have multiplicity of acts which we need to look at, and not just one bare act. Okay, so I'm going more by the international definitions because I feel in the global era, most of the contracts you will realize will have an international or a cross-border agreement. Okay, so why not study those? Yes, we need to make contracts which are enforceable as per Indian law, but yes, we should also keep in mind the international aspect of the contracts. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, a commercial contract refers to a legally binding agreement between parties, which are between parties in which they are obligated to do or not to do certain things. By definition, commercial contract represent a combination of commercial and legal factors. What most lawyers do is they focus only on the legal factors and fail to look at the commercial aspects. But a good lawyer should, that is where we say, you need to understand the client's business. Don't just say that I'm making agreement between two parties. I don't know what the business is. I don't know what my client's interests are and the other party. So we have to understand clients' businesses and the backdrop in which a contract is being made. And good lawyers today are involved in the negotiations. Okay, we are not coming in where everything has been decided that a software program will make if you just fill in the blanks of the names and the dates and all, we don't need a lawyer to do that anymore, right? So our bigger role is coming in the negotiation stage for the legal and the commercial terms. What should our clients do? What should they not do? Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so very, very broadly speaking, this is an important slide, and I'm assuming again that all of you do understand this, but for the benefit of those who are absolutely new and a beginner to this, so essentials of a valid contract, we have an agreement in place, two parties join together to agree to do some activities. Okay, so there has to be an agreement to start with. Intention to create a legal relationship. We're not talking about a social contract. Competency of parties. Both parties have to be competent, like legal age. They should not be of unsound mind. Now, in different countries, legal ages can be different. Some countries could be 18, it could be 21 in some other countries. That we have to look at, obviously, the country or the jurisdiction in which right now we are focusing more on India. But I think it is very important for us to get basic understanding of contract law in America, in UK, in Australia, because these are, and US probably is North America. Nearly all the big multinational companies, large companies have a presence in the US. So I think it is very, very important for us to understand American law also and American business law particularly. Competency of parties, free consent. Obviously, there should be no coercion. There should be, both parties. It has to be proven that they have very consent is free. Lawful consideration again. Lawful object. These are very basic things. I'm not getting into details of this. We can spend many hours on these, but these are very, very basic things. So I'm quickly skipping through. Agreements not expressly declared void. There are certain activities which you are prohibited to enter into. Let's say a gambling contract in India is explicitly declared void, but maybe in UK, as per their laws, betting is allowed. Okay, betting on sports, betting on horse races. So again, if you look at international law, we have to look at, and we should keep our mind open for, we do not live in in isolation anymore. So we need to look at global laws as well. Certainty and possibility of performance and legal formalities. If we keep these 9 things in mind, any 2 individuals or any 2 corporate entities, we can help them make any contract. Okay. And that is where good lawyering skills come in. That you will be surprised as to what all kind of contracts businesses need today. Okay. They want to do something, they want to stop somebody from doing something, and that is where law firms are coming in, and it is becoming very specialized. So from very simple contracts, we have a lease agreement, okay, pretty standardized. But the lease agreement could be for a commercial lease, which could be for, you know, very, very high value with a lot of exit clauses. So it can get complex. Simple agreements, which appear to be very simple, can become very, very complicated as well. And agreements like share purchase agreement or a shareholder agreement of a startup company could be actually be we were part of making a shareholder agreement where a Japanese company was investing in an Indian company. Okay, it was they were taking a 30% control over an Indian company, and that shareholder agreement actually had 300 pages. When we reduced it to as much as we could, okay, because it was mandatory and the stakes were very, very high. But otherwise, a simple 1 or 2 page agreement is what is normally being used for most contracts. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, there are 2 elements of any contract: agreement, legal obligation. All agreements are contracts if they are made by free consent of parties and competent to contract for a lawful consideration with a lawful object and are not hereby expressed, declared to be void. Okay, next slide. So here we are also talking about perfection cannot be achieved in drafting unless the nexus between law, facts, and language is fully understood. Even things like a comma or a full stop can make a big difference in the wordings of a contract. Okay. So what we as lawyers also try to do is, in today's day and age, we are also helping our corporate clients. We are helping them make templates where we tell them there is no need to consult us. We are giving you for standard things. We are creating templates for you. Just fill in the name of the, let's say you have vendors, you have a car manufacturer has 50 vendors or 100 vendors. Then we could have a standard customized vendor agreement for them. Okay. So what we are also doing is, earlier on, every agreement, clients used to come to lawyers. So what we're trying to do is now making their life easy also and making our life also easy. Okay. But customization is which is important. In my book also, I have given sample agreements of cross-border agreements, joint ventures, startup, merger, M&A. The good templates are all there, but templates on itself, by itself, are not enough. Customization is always required, and that is where a lawyer's skills come into practice. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so structure of commercial contracts. There is no set formula for the formation of a contract, and it can be tailored to suit the specific requirements of the parties involved. There are, however, certain elements which will serve to clarify the terms of the contract and help in the event of a future dispute. It is also important to be aware of situations where the terms of a contract can be varied or even cancelled. Okay, so obviously contracts are made keeping in mind that the businesses will be carry on, and we as business lawyers also tell our clients that we are there to help you expand your businesses, right? But in case of a dispute, which is quite natural to happen in a dynamic business environment, then it should be in black and white, and it should be actually be favoring our client because they are the ones who are engaging us. But over the years, one more thing has changed. Earlier on, contracts used to be made 100% for the clients. Okay, it is like a one-sided agreement in your favor. But those things have changed now. Most good lawyers and law firms are looking at making balanced contracts, which are win-win for both parties and not just your own clients. We're also looking at it that it should be fair to the other party as well. And it's our job to guide our clients sometimes. Because if it is a fair contract, the partnership will continue for a much longer period. And if we make very unfair contracts, keeping in mind immediately that it will help our clients, but in the long run, it is not going to benefit our clients. So we must look at the best interest of our clients. And sometimes we have to fight with our clients also, because they feel that this is how it should be done and they are paying lawyers to do this. We stand up to them, and many a time we say, no, you're wrong. And good lawyer will always stand up to his clients to say that you think this is right for you, but I know my job. Let me do my job. Okay, it's like a patient telling doctors, no, I've checked on the internet, this is the best medicine. Doesn't work. Most of the time, our clients think they know because they have been doing their research on Google, and we have our practical experience, and we have to stand up to our clients. So client management also is a very important part of being a good lawyer, and understanding your clients' requirements and working with them, and not automatically listening to whatever they say without using our own mind and our own brains. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, before there can be a contract, the potential buyer must make an offer showing an intention to be bound by a simple acceptance of the terms stated without further negotiations. The seller must then accept on the terms without qualification. Very, very important part in a contract, okay? Because many times what happens is that there are 5 or 6 main components in an agreement, right? But 2 or 3 points could be left like vague. Okay, we can do this. Maybe we'll give you 5% commission, maybe 6%. Or we will reimburse your expenses, but what is the limit? So before we make a contract, that is where many a times in some agreements, we have what we call an agreement to sell, which is made. Many a times we also have a term sheet for startup companies, like when companies are getting together. So those are, before we make the final agreement, we say, okay, let's confirm to what all we have confirmed already. And then we draw up the agreement, rather than wasting time in making the entire agreement and then parties not agreeing to a few important points. So first thing is, it's like by an email or verbally, we confirm exactly what both parties want. Till everything is confirmed, there is no point in drawing up the agreement, because then we will be going on and off, and it takes forever to finalize the agreement. And the contract has to be signed by both parties. So even if our clients or the other party does not sign the agreement or the contract, then it is of no use to anybody. So all the work is wasted, right? So ensuring that both parties have agreed in principle, then we work and convert it into a legal language. Okay. Next slide, please. The cancellation of a contract. Parties to a contract are free to agree that one of them can cancel the agreement. In theory, there is nothing to prevent the contract from containing such clauses by which one of the parties is allowed to cancel the contract in a wide variety of circumstances. Obviously, we are talking about business contracts. It's a very, very dynamic business environment. Things are changing constantly. Either one of the parties may need to get out of the contract. So we should always have a termination clause or a clause for, obviously we will come to dispute resolution. And what we are going through right now, the force majeure clause, we are just going to come to it very, very quickly. What happens when it is beyond anybody's individual capacity? It is out of control of both these parties. Okay, and I'll give you examples so you will probably be able to understand faster. Yes, please, can we go on to the next slide? Yeah, effective contract management. Okay. Okay, let's skip some of these. We have less time. I'll give you these slides so you can take a look later on. Yes, can you quickly go over the slides, please? Yeah, franchise agreements, very, very important. All of you must understand, for any business organization to go, whether it is a McDonald's, whether it is a, the franchise way of expanding is very important for businesses. So understanding franchise agreements, very critical for any good lawyer. And I don't think any of the law schools really focus too much on these specific agreements. So what is happening is your theory is very theoretical, unfortunately. But this is what will be required. And that is why when you join law firms or lawyers in the corporate sector, they feel that, okay, you don't know enough to actually help them in their real work. So getting familiar with all these is very critical before you join or even apply. And if you know all these terms and you are familiar with these agreements, you will mention them in your resumes. Believe me, your chances of getting selected will be much higher than just saying that I've read Contract Act, which is very good, but your practical side might not be there. But getting familiar with startup laws, it's a huge practice area. Understanding what shareholder agreements are, what franchise agreements are, okay? What is a joint venture agreement? What defines the shareholder agreements? You start getting into these specific areas. Otherwise, believe me, it is just not easy. And internships are also, sometimes we also take in interns, they can't add much value. And most of the time, the reality is that busy lawyers do not have the time set aside to train young interns like yourself. Okay, so what they need to do is actually be prepared for what is coming. And if you already tell them that I'm already familiar with these basic contracts, I understand the terms, you will have a definite and clear edge over the other students who are there. The next slide, please. Yeah. So joint venture agreements, very, very critical again, must understand them. Two entities come together to make a joint venture and do businesses. So yeah, next slide, please. One second. Sorry, this is working from home. My dog needs to go out for a walk, so excuse me. Okay. Mergers and acquisitions, again, agreements, very critical. Big, huge area. In fact, we have a lot of, I've designed some other courses also specifically for M&A. Please try to understand this. This is the fastest growing area in law firms and in the corporate sector. The best and the fanciest and the most well-paying jobs with investment banks, with law firms, with corporate sector are all in the M&A field. Okay. And job opportunities, not just in India, but also I know Singapore, Dubai, all these countries are actively looking for Indian lawyers who have done. And if you can, understand M&A field, I think this is for the young lawyers, I think a very, very interesting field to specialize in. The next slide, please. Non-disclosure agreements. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with these, but these are now specific agreements we're talking about rather than generally talking about agreements. Very, very critical in businesses. When companies are negotiating with each other, first thing they do is sign non-disclosure agreement that whatever information are available with us, which is important and key information, should not be shared by anybody or misused. Our agreement may or may not happen. Our joint venture may come through or not come through. But the information which we share with you is protected because companies have spent crores of rupees in doing research work, R&D. It could be a biotechnology company, it could be an app in a startup. So the information has to be shared, without which sometimes you can't work with other companies. But how do you, and that information is not misused by those companies. So you need to protect yourself in the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement. So from a simple one-page NDA, it could run into 200 pages as well, depending on the complexity and the importance of that agreement in that particular business. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, contract labor agreement. Any manufacturing, this is pretty simple. Employment contracts are still relatively simple, but what we are talking about will be for what we call senior executives in organizations, director level, CEO level contracts. So we are not talking about a Factories Act and a simple labor agreement. We're talking about what should be. There are so many new terms which you all need to be familiar with. Things like golden handcuffs, things like ESOPs, things like garden leave. You know, when people are changing, what is the time period, what is the cooling off period? So first of all, these definitions and words are new for all of you. Get familiar with it. What we don't want is you get your A pluses in you get your distinctions in your law colleges, and you land up and get a job also. And then you say, but I've never heard of these terms. Okay, and it is possible because none of the textbooks in India, unfortunately, they are not making you familiar with these. I don't know why, but that's a different debate altogether. But you need to, the onus lies on you as an individual to upgrade yourself, to be relevant and useful to the corporates, to the clients, to the law firms, to the lawyers, to your private clients you want to help out with. If you're not familiar with them, it's as good as you don't have a law degree. So my point being that don't just collect a paper degree. Yes, it's important to get that degree, because without that you will not be admitted to the bar. Without that you can't call yourself a lawyer. But without the real knowledge, your degree is not of much value. So please understand why sometimes lawyers, many young lawyers are not able to get good breaks, because they've studied their course, but the syllabus is unfortunately too outdated. Okay, so and things are changing so rapidly that even us lawyers, people like us are also undergoing training programs all the time. If we don't do that, we are ourselves left out. So short-term programs, assignments, virtual internships, programs, there are many courses. Harvard Law has some courses online, some are free, some are very, very expensive. I was just looking at a program, it was costing $14,000 in international business law. Okay, now not every student can afford a $14,000 program, but we are trying to come up with simpler versions of those, where you need to understand that, because it's not just the certificate. If you have that knowledge, believe me, you will not find the job search so difficult once you are closer to your graduation. The next slide, please. Thanks. And can we come to the other slides on the, can you just switch on the cameras, please? Yeah. Okay, can we open the mics very quickly for a couple of comments? And Dr. Haldar, can you want to comment on anything? Yes, Doctor.
Any questions, etc., related to the slides just showed, and also the discussions that sir is now going ahead with, please come up.
Yeah, we can have short queries, because I have another, obviously the other section on force majeure, and we'll get into it, and I will talk a little bit about international contracts and about startup contracts a little bit. But any initial comments or questions, please, I think this is a good time to quickly go through them. Yeah, raise of hands.
Yes, yes, sir.
Or Dr. Haldar, if you want any, any question or anything which, we could, you have in mind, because I am again speaking from the very practical side. I'm not really a, law professor. I've just been doing some visiting business law courses to, SP Jain and IMT and, other colleges. But I'm purely talking from the practical side of it, and I will give some examples dealing with contracts and the issues we faced. But at this point,
before we go ahead for the next slide, I was actually listening to your lecture and I was like, making some points. I don't know whether it is relevant or not, but it is out of my own curiosity. Suppose, for example, any party, individual party, or even a corporate house, etc., they have made some agreement with any Chinese company. And, seeing from this perspective that, we have a pandemic and people are actually told to block China, etc., how would that be executed, and whether that can be at all executed or not? Seeing it from the political perspective also, the government perspective also.
No, great question. And I think that is the, I think it's a very, very pertinent and relevant question, because see, but law is very clear, it is fortunately or unfortunately sometimes not based on common sense, okay? Because law is, in fact, it is important for us as lawyers also, and as, people from the legal industry, that we believe in, first thing you say anything, that this is what happened, PM said this, or, without making it political, or this is what we read in the newspaper. A good lawyer will always say, show me where is it written.
Yes.
And where is the law, which is the circular. Without that, it is just anybody can publish anything today. There is fake news, there is real news, there is general speeches which are being made by senior, dignitaries. It has no legal basis. Okay, so coming very quickly, any contract with a Chinese company is legally valid. International arbitration centers are there. On our own, we cannot see, private individuals can take any decision. We can switch off, we can remove an app or whatever. But otherwise, actually, this is a very good question, because currently there are so many major contracts issued by the government of India in favor of Chinese companies. Okay, I don't want to make this political at all, but some have already been in place. They cannot be otherwise, and there are very severe penalties, financial penalties, for anybody to get out of those contracts. So that is where these are legally binding commercial agreements, right? So once they have been signed, until unless there is a very clear violation by the company for not performing their duties, government of India cannot get out of these contracts. Otherwise, pay sometimes such huge financial penalties. And if we were to do that no company, see, let us not talk about India and China, just for a brief moment. Let's say there is a company, small country in Africa, which signs contracts with with Amazon, with other big companies all across the globe. Now, if they were to get out of their contracts easily and say, no, based on our political preferences, we will not honor commitment, then it becomes a banana republic, which we are not. Okay, so even if two countries are at war with each other, the legal agreements have to, because there has to be a difference between, yes, the parties could be governments of both those countries, but finally they are business and commercial agreements drawn under the international contracts law, and there are arbitration centers defined in case of disputes. Only they can take a final call on it. So to answer your question, these are valid contracts, cannot be just done away with, and wishfully cannot be done away with, right? Okay. We will also come to the anything. I hope I've been able to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Anything else on behalf of students? Because I want to make it a one-way, not a one-way discussion. It has to be if you've understood everything, either you've understood, students have understood everything, or they have understood nothing. Okay, so I don't want it to be that they have understood nothing. So I do want if any comments, any questions.
So
Yes, please.
yeah, you know, what I observed is that in your slides also, you know, you talked about and being relevant in the industry, and you know, build yourself, even you know, just not have a law degree. So I also recently hosted a entrepreneurship in AR webinar. So can you just throw some light upon how can, if not here also in another webinar, that how a law student can rapidly grow a network? What are the ways? Basically, a whole network-based, informal network-based
Sure,
session.
I'll take 5 minutes, and then please join in a membership session which we'll be conducting. And Dr. Haldar, I would invite you to join our session also, and we will take your valuable inputs and guidance as well, because you have been, interacting with so many students. You know what is there in their mind. So we'll be happy to invite you in our mentorship sessions as a mentor. Please do join us, and it's like a little movement happening. Good, knowledgeable people are always welcome, and experience is really important, right? So what I suggest is, can I say something? All you law students may not like it. I want to give you the truth. Yes, I think you are not putting enough pressure on yourselves. 5 years, I see too many students taking it very casually, that okay, we'll do some internship 1 month. I've seen students, they just need certificates. You are not putting your blood, sweat, and tears into it right now. And I see that. And I fear for many of you that when the time will come after 5 years, it's like there's a Chinese saying in the Olympics. They say that we cry when we practice, and we laugh when we get the medals. And they have been some of the top performers in the Olympics over the years. What I feel is that many of you, I'm not saying all of you, but many of you are taking your 5 years for granted and having a very good, nice, enjoyable time. You go for your classes, you do 1 or 2 internships, you come back, and then after 5 years, I see too many students now with 1, 2, 5 years of experience saying that I'm struggling in my job, or I'm not getting the right break, or I'm in my practice, but I'm not able to deliver. And I feel it is too late for me to guide them. That is why I, in fact, want to work with first, second, third year students who still have 2 or 3 years left. You need to put enough pressure, my friends. You are not, you're taking it casually, and I don't want you to face the music and realize this after you have graduated, because the real battle will start once you start practicing. There is a huge future, but for the right person. So there is enough stuff which you can all do. And I'll be happy. We have enough stuff I've been doing a lot of, I have interns who have started off, worked with me for three years. Okay. And yes, we start off normally with unpaid internships. And a lot of people say, why unpaid and why should I not get paid? Debatable topic. But in virtual internships, at least the model which I have been using is, we start off with unpaid because we want to find out who's serious and not serious. And there are students who earn anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 to 25,000 rupees for assignment. I'm taking help of law students. And you'll be surprised, some of them are just first year law students, some could be third year or fifth year. So use your time, please use your time. You are not putting, I'm telling you, you're not putting enough time, and once you will pick up jobs with big law firms or with big corporates in India or overseas, you will feel the heat, as we say, the pressure. So don't mind my saying, but I think there's a lot which you guys can do. And it is not just about just studying in classes and doing some moot courts and, going for some simplistic internships and coming back. Okay. You will realize that law firms, even when you partner in a big law firm, the challenges are huge. Finding clients, retaining clients, surpassing their expectations. We don't work with clients today where this is the job and this is the money. Yes, this money is good. For contracts, we can charge anywhere from 3, 5, 15, 25 lakhs for some of these agreements which we make. Right? But we have to surpass their expectations. Okay? And so you will understand this gradually. And I'm happy that all of you are taking the time out to interact on these webinars with other people who are practicing. Connect with them. There is so much more you can. I can have a 2-hour session with all of you to tell you what all you can do, which you're not doing right now. But today might not be the forum. Connect with me, and we're doing another seminar on mentorship in the next couple of days' time. Join in, and we'll be only about this only. In fact, I'm taking a session with lawyers also with 3 to 5 to 10 years of experience. They've also got stuck in their little practices or in their jobs and don't know how to go to the next level. Right? So, it's like it's a challenge. It's not that anybody is, even whether it is the top rated big law firms or it is the mid-sized firms or the individual practitioners, everybody has challenges in their lives. But the opportunities are huge, let me also tell you. And not just in overseas. Today, India is the hub for talent. It used to be doctors and engineers who used to go from India. Now it is the lawyers, the best lawyers. They are taking up jobs in Singapore, Dubai, Australia, Canada. Believe me, they have like a huge shortage of good people in law. But for the right person with the right mindset, attitude, communication skills, which can't be learned overnight. Okay, skills can be upgraded, knowledge can be upgraded, but your attitude, your ability to commitment. So let me not focus on that. We'll leave it for another session completely. Okay, can we go to the first major circular?
There's a question in the chat box by Aarti Modi that whether a person can be jailed for violating a non-disclosure agreement, or what is the otherwise penalty for it?
Can the person be jailed?
Yes.
For
violating a non-disclosure agreement, or otherwise, what is the penalty for it?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, interesting question. And this goes for all these, whenever, and that is where we look at civil and criminal side on contracts. And that is why, as we say, as lawyers, we keep our jobs and we continue to get paid because it is complex. Any contract, whether it is an NDA or any of these other agreements which come into the picture. Yes, we have the Basic Contract Act to start with, but then Indian Penal Code. Okay, I suggest you, all of you, if you don't have it, buy these, either the bare acts or the soft versions. Everybody is available. You don't have to actually spend too much money on fancy books. Yes, your libraries are there and all, but get to the root of all bare acts. Not just in Indian law, but also overseas laws. Everything today we have Google at our disposal, gives us raw data. Okay. Yes, is in violation of these. We only design, let's say if there is a strong NDA, and in fact, I'll give you an example. We had a firm in India, which was in biotechnology. Couple of their senior employees left and joined their competitor and took away 5 years of research with them. Okay, so we initially filed the civil suits and it said, okay, they have to compensate so much. So 5-10 lakhs was very easy money for the competitor to just give them. Finally, we ourselves, we helped file a criminal complaint and FIR was lodged because of the violation of the IPC Act. And it was you have to understand what in every country, what works. So as we are actually getting paid, our advice and all is fine, but finally we have to get results for our clients. So we can say that we filed a civil case, which will go on for 30 years. We'll go to the district court, session court, high court, Supreme Court. Client doesn't want that. He wanted an injunction. Can we get a stay? Can we put a stop to him? And it was the fear of actually their landing up in jail, which actually deterred them from doing what they were, because then it was theft of intellectual knowledge. And we calculated that 5 years, 200 engineers, 200 doctors were working on a biotechnology product, and 3 people just steal that information and go to a competitor, and literally they were giving jobs basically to sell that information to them. And civil remedy could not have solved it till we had to put criminal procedure pressure on them. The FIRs made all the difference. And there, that they will go to jail for 3 years or 5 years was actually the deterrent. We didn't like doing it, but we had to do it. And that is what actually gave the results. So sometimes it is, you know, we're looking at finding solutions for our clients and not just saying, okay, you file a petition, you know, do whatever. So in India, our legal system, we have some of the best laws in the world. Okay, please understand that. Constitutional experts will tell you some of the laws which we have, we are better off than US and UK and Australia. Only thing is that our justice system, the delays are there. And so as they say in our Indian system, bail and stay are 2 important remedies which clients look for at times. Because the matters can drag on for 20, 30 years between the various levels of court. So finally, but what works is the criminal side is very, very critical in the corporate law section today. And good lawyers who have understood this are making the difference. Otherwise, a corporate lawyer will say, I don't know criminal law, talk to a criminal lawyer. But if you, so that, when I'm saying can you make a difference? So a corporate lawyer who understands criminal law is the cutting edge required, because 99% of corporate lawyers have never been to the courts. Criminal law, they'll say, oh, I don't know, talk to a criminal lawyer. Criminal lawyer is only doing murder and, you know, heinous crimes most of the time. He says, I don't understand these contracts. I don't even know how to, you know, read a contract, and I'm not even familiar with it. But so on the corporate side, so there are various combinations which are coming in. You master those, you will not have to look for jobs. People will come chasing you that please join us, work with us. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Can we go on quickly to the force majeure? Neeraj Parth, can you please switch on the circular first? Yeah. Great. Okay. So force majeure, I hope most of you would have seen the circular, because as lawyers, again, we don't talk about hearsay and we don't talk about what was mentioned in, you know, in some newspaper or some news article. This is the notification. It came in right. This was issued on 19th February 2020. Okay, issued by Deputy Secretary of the Government of India. Signed document, and we can verify it also. There are ways to verify that this is a genuine document. Okay, so attention is invited to para 9.7.7 of the Manual of the Procurement of Goods issued by the department, which is so force majeure means extraordinary events or circumstances beyond human control, such as an event described as an act of God, like a natural calamity. So here what is happening is Government of India themselves have declared COVID-19 as a force majeure clause. Okay, there was a lot of speculation till this circular was issued. In India, Contracts Act, Indian government issuing direct bearing, because many contracts had force majeure clause and many contracts did not have it also. And I'll be very honest in admitting that till now, nobody in the world bothered about this force majeure clause. It was a cut and paste job. Standard, put whatever it is, because it's never used. It was last time force majeure clause was used when the tsunami had come in Southeast Asia. Many hotels were destroyed, many lives were lost. Before that, nobody really bothered about force majeure. Okay, we've hardly had any wars in the last many years. Okay, so nobody really bothered about it. But now with this circular, so this is a basis of the document on which currently most of the cases are still in the courts. Okay, and I will come about what is happening on the force majeure clause. We'll go into the definitions also. So a doubt has arisen if the disruption of the supply chain due to spread of coronavirus in China or any other country will be covered in the force majeure clause, FMC. In this regard, it is classified, this is the second point I'm reading out. In this regard, it is classified that it should be considered as a case of natural calamity, and FMC, force majeure clause, may be invoked wherever considered appropriate, following the due procedure as above. Okay, can we get on to the other slides, please? Force majeure. And can we come back to the camera, please? 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So you can ask questions, I think, on the chat mode also, and I think Yashvi, you can, because I'm not looking at the questions, but anybody has any idea of force majeure clause? General comment anybody would want to make? It's not a new term, I hope, for all of you. Okay. We'll carry on because it will be with the Indian context as well as at the global level, right? Okay, let's just go on to the word file. This is actually an article which I had published some time back, and I'll be happy to share this, the force majeure clause, because it's a developing story currently. As story, I will say, because case laws, we ourselves on behalf of our clients have also filed many cases right now. Okay, and I'll give you live examples of, so you can fully understand. Okay. So I'm not going to read too much from this, but it is basic definitions. You must all look at force majeure clauses are contractual clauses which alter parties obligations and or liabilities under a contract where an extraordinary event or circumstances beyond the control prevents one or all.
Name Kuhu Mathil. वो मुझे स्पेस करना नहीं आता, स्पेस कैसे करते हैं, नीचे कैसे जाए?
Okay, beyond the control prevents one or all of them from fulfilling their obligations. So let me start by giving examples here. So it says, is COVID-19 a force majeure event or not? Can we come back to the camera, please? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I'll give you practical examples, probably will be easier for you to understand. So force majeure itself, I hate using these Latin terms, but it's a term which basically means beyond the control, or you could call it act of God. So first time this really took effect was at the time of the tsunami which came in, right? So giving you an example, there could be a landlord and a tenant. The landlord could be a large five-star hotel property, let's say, right? Assuming it's in Goa, okay? So I'm the property owner. I own the resort, but there is a, let's say, a Sheraton or a Oberoi's or a Hilton, which is the hotel operator. Okay, look at it from that point of view. I have made a contract, because I own the property. I said I'm the landlord. I'm giving it out on rent to these hotel operators at a monthly rent of, let's say, 30 lakhs or 50 lakhs. There's a large property, 300 rooms, maybe 50 lakhs per month. We have a lease signed agreement for 30 years. Okay. Fixed, both parties, and it's been going on for the last 5 years. Everybody's happy. The hotel is being operated by a Hilton or a Oberoi's chain. They earn revenue and they give me rent 50 lakhs per month. Everybody's happy. Now there is a natural calamity, a tsunami comes. It happened in Bali, it happened in Phuket, it happened in many parts of India also, where because of the large tsunami, the hotel itself was smashed, wiped out completely. Okay. I didn't do anything wrong. I had done all the protection which could be required to. I had very sound building. everything was fine. But today, the building does not exist. The tenant has to pay me 50 lakhs every month because it's a lien signed, registered agreement. And if he doesn't pay, I will take him to court. And I will, I have the power to, finish the contract, terminate the contract, and take the deposit, which could be 3 years rent or whatever, right? But he's saying, why should I pay rent? That property which I had contracted for does not exist anymore. So typically, force majeure clause kicks in at this stage, where the real estate or the object of the whole contract itself does not exist anymore. And it was not a fault of either party. There was no negligence. We have to prove that. Okay, it's not that my construction was of low quality. Construction was of the top quality. Everything was taken. But an earthquake happened, the building collapsed. In such a case, force majeure kicks in, which says that now both parties can get out of the contract. Similarly, COVID-19 now, okay, because it has been declared, if it was not being declared, nobody could assume that it will become force majeure. But now Government of India has clarified that yes, COVID-19 is a force majeure clause. But the other side of force majeure is that just because your business is not doing well does not mean that you can get out of your contracts. Again, I'll give you an example. There are malls all over India, right? Many cities, malls have been shut down. In Delhi, in Bombay, in Gurgaon, in Ahmedabad. Some period they were shut down, some periods they are open now. Now, every business owner today is suffering because of COVID-19, because of which businesses have dropped and they are saying we can't pay the rents. Our business is not earning enough money to pay such high rent. I'm just giving you the example of, again, a mall owner rental contract under COVID-19. I can also give you an international example. There's an exporter in India which is got a manufacturing setup, and he's supplying 10,000 shirts to the best brands in Paris, let's say, right? His shipment is ready, but it cannot be shipped out because the shipping lines are closed, or the customs offices are not. He is unable to honor his contract, although he has done everything which he could have done, and his payment is stuck. And the buyer is saying, we will cancel your agreement because you have not shipped your products to us. But the exporter is saying, it's not my fault. I have done all that I could do. Now it is beyond my control. Government of India, international airlines, it is beyond my control completely. So force majeure clause kicks in, but you cannot take undue advantage of saying that because my business is not doing well, then I will not honor my commercial commitments. You have to prove that your business has directly been impacted, and that particular, so it's on a case-by-case basis. And what is the final test? Who will decide? The courts will decide. Or if there is an arbitration clause, the arbitrator may decide, and then it would go to the courts. And actually, as lawyers, it has been very beneficial to all lawyers, because nearly every big contract is in a dispute today, in India as well as internationally. So people who are specializing on commercial contracts are flooded with work right now. We ourselves have filed on behalf of so many clients. We have a lot of hospitality clients, like I mentioned. Like we could be on one side, we could be from the person who owns the property or the person who's renting the property, but the stakes are super high. These are running into hundreds of crores contracts, which have to be renegotiated. So we will also come back to, besides COVID-19, the impact, we're also coming down to the ADR. Earlier on, lawyers' role was to, okay, if there is a fight, you go to the courts, you hire a lawyer. But today we are part of those negotiations which are happening. We tell our clients, please, there's no point in getting into a court fight, which will continue for a very, very long time. We are encouraging our landlords to reduce the rent. We are also encouraging our tenants to have a dialogue with their landlords. So we are trying to mediate rather than just saying, okay, you tell us go, if nobody's honoring their contract, then go file a case. That is not the solution. That is the last step. If everything else fails, then we go to war and go to the courts. So as business lawyers, our objective is to resolve a crisis. Although many, as lawyers, you might think it's not in our personal, professional best interest. If we resolve our conflicts, the legal conflict, then who will come to us because we have resolved the problems? But that is not the case. If we help them resolve their conflicts, they understand, clients understand that you are helping them, unnecessarily wasting time in courts. The court fee is there, the process is large. At the end of it, the judge is also, or the arbitrator is also an unbiased legal expert who will look at both sides of the situations and pass an order, right? And we are saying, let's do it informally if we can, give it a shot. And this is the advancement in ADR, the dispute resolution, which is happening now globally. That we are trying to resolve disputes by actually getting into their businesses. If it's a 30 lakh rental agreement, we are saying it's unreasonable. We are telling the landlord, it's easy for you to throw this tenant out, but will you get a new tenant at half the price also? And if you're agreeing to that, yes, the markets have fallen, we'll only, instead of 50 lakhs, we'll only get 25 lakhs as the rent, then why not offer that discount to your existing tenant? And we are telling the client, the tenant also, that today you will get out. Will you want to shut your business forever? So we are looking at terms and then we are renegotiating deals. Okay, and that is where it is having an impact, again, cross-border, in India, overseas, but everybody's kind of stuck. There is no right and wrong in this. It has happened because of nobody's fault. In a commercial contract, neither of the parties are at fault, but they're both facing a problem which needs a solution. And what businesses do not want is a deadlock. Both parties, whichever businesses, exporters, importers, traders, suppliers, will suffer if there is a deadlock. So as lawyers, what are we trying to do? We're trying to ensure that their businesses get on track. Both have to, so it's a good lawyer today is a very good negotiator. Helping their clients negotiate and helping them look at the other side's story also. And not only saying, only look at my interest, because then if it is not a win-win situation, nobody benefits. Right? So these are some of the things which I wanted to mention about the force majeure clause. It is important now and in future, and if this clause is not there, still there are a couple of other, it could still be taken into consideration, even if it is not specifically mentioned in the agreement. But in future agreements, there will be a lot of thought which will go into a force majeure clause. India, there are a lot of earthquakes expected this year. Okay, so again, it's in case there is a factory, there's a disruption of service, the factory itself is gone, then what happens to all the agreements which somebody may have taken huge advances saying that I will deliver, and there are penalty clauses. So finally, at the end of the day, the agreement, we look at the country law, the international law, the national law, and then whatever both the parties have agreed to. And where is it mentioned? In the agreement itself. So our role has become even more important based on these experiences. And there are a lot of this, why I say this is a developing story, because and they will become the precedent. So there is no clear law on force majeure in India, which side is right, who's right. It will only be tested once it is coming to the courts now. So courts are now getting filled with cases in India as well as internationally, as well as the arbitration centers. And then each decided cases will become the precedent. Right? I hope I've been able to give you some basic understanding. Any questions on this? Yeah. Praksha Shah. Yes. Can you switch on a mic, please?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
I wanted to ask that does this clause apply on the online contracts? Like, say I am a seller on listed on Amazon, or if I am a buyer on Amazon, does this clause will apply on the online contracts? Online businesses which are.
See, this clause will apply in every contract. So you're talking about, like, if you are a consumer, are you looking at it from that point of view, or are you a supplier?
Sir, let's say that I am a supplier on the Amazon or listed on the Amazon, and I have contracted them for and they have given me some I have listed my products, or I had a contract that I am a new seller on the Amazon or something like that. So this clause will also apply there.
Yes, it will apply, but finally what needs to be looked at is what is the agreement between the supplier and Amazon. And Amazon is a very, very smart company. They would have already covered all their bases. 99%, they would have left nothing which would not have been covered in their favor. But all these contracts can still be challenged.
Right.
Okay? What has happened is in the last few years, we've seen it in real estate contracts, competition commission, and if any contract is totally one-sided, even if you sign it, you can still challenge it. It's not that because if it is against public policy, if it is against your rights, and if the other party had a very monopolistic kind of you said there is nobody else, I had to sign it because otherwise they would not let me do business. You also have your rights. Okay, it can still be challenged. But finally, to comment upon it, one has to, that is where we say, we look at what is written in the contract. And you'll be surprised, even as a consumer, look up today as an exercise. We're all buying from Amazon. How many of us have actually looked at the contract between the consumer or the purchaser and Amazon? Do that today. We just sign up and tick mark, yes, 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 I agree. You can download it, take a screenshot, print it out, read that contract. Read your contracts which you have. This is also to do with cyber law. Read the contracts which we are signing when we are signing up for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, WhatsApp. None of us, including myself, I would say, have bothered to read it. We just say, oh, yes, doesn't matter. But actually it matters. You've actually, as a consumer, given away nearly all your rights by signing. But does not mean that we cannot challenge them. Point is that if it is unfair, it can be challenged. So, that's how we will look at it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks. So I've already taken more than the time allotted to me. So if anybody has any more questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, we can more or less, from my side, I can go on for the next 5 hours.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Sir, if there are two countries which come in, like two companies which are from different countries, they come into a contract, and there's a situation which invokes force majeure in one of the countries. Like, for example, a country is suffering from floods, but the other country is not. So in that case, can they invoke force majeure, or how will it
do? Absolutely. See, what's happening is two companies, different jurisdictions. Okay, one could be India, one could be South Africa, or it could be America, or it could be China, right? And first of all, in every international agreement, they have to conform to a jurisdiction to start with. You cannot have two jurisdictions in any contract. So first of all, you have chosen the jurisdiction which will decide in case of any dispute. But yes, to answer your question, the answer is yes. If one of the countries, but force majeure has to be proven, and it cannot just be that because my business has got affected, it has to directly impact. You have to prove that that factory only was burned down, or that factory was closed, or it was because of COVID, let's say nobody was allowed to enter. So during that particular, and there are a lot of legal formalities to be completed before you take advantage of this COVID-19. Legal notices have to be sent. So there is a very clear, it's not that anybody wakes up and says, okay, because of COVID-19, I will not honor my commitment. It will not work like this. So the checks and balances are there in that system. Yes, it can be used, but it can only be used in very, very genuine and real situations, and that too probably it will still be going to court, right?
And so, what if a contract does not have a clause for force majeure?
Yeah, then also it will still work. Doesn't mean that if you don't have, then it's called the rule of frustration. You know, that the whole matter, ideally it should have, but if it does not have, still it is a valid reason for not honoring a contract. Okay, even if it has not been explicitly mentioned. But if it is explicitly mentioned, then it is a very clear-cut black and white case. In the other situation, you will have to make your case. So in future contracts, you will not find any contract which will not have a force majeure clause, a very substantial force majeure clause put into the contract. Okay. So Dr. Haldar, I think it's been informative for me. I've enjoyed the session. Anything else which you want to add?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So actually, I was I was taking note, and I was actually listening to your opinion about this online contracts, and also about Facebook and other sorts of social media platforms, and WhatsApp, etc. Sir, I have one query regarding this. There are many contracts, like exactly what you were saying. There were many contracts which are now being sent through WhatsApp. And later onwards, one of the students asked, I think Rakhya asked that even when we are making it through some, websites, etc., especially when it is a case of click wrap contract, or when it is a case of even browse wrap contract also, we are getting to see that we are entering into multiple layers of contract. And all of us know, it is purely from my research interest, all of us know that the government of India has also shared that there is going to be some cyber, risks which is going to come up. So one of my friends, one of my batchmates from Calcutta, he shared that he has already received some kinds of information which he, did not click into it. What is the responsibility, in your understanding, what is the responsibility of these websites? Because they're also now a party to these kinds of agreement, contract, etc. We all know about due diligence, but during this pandemic, do you think that the website should be made more responsible in this regard?
No, absolutely. The website owners are responsible. It will be a case of criminal negligence.
Yes.
If, let's say it's a banking website, or so yes, very stringent measures are required. That is like on the ownership of these websites, because what is happening is, if a virus is planted into their websites, and then see, there are two ways to look at it. One is that a criminal, could be a country, could be individuals, could be a company, is duplicating something which you as a business owner have no control over. Okay, they are just camouflaging a website, and a fake website is being created, or a fake message. There you have no control over. But if through your website something is being done, so very clearly, that have you added enough protection from your side? If there is virus protection, if there, whatever the systems, because if you have not taken enough precaution and somebody else suffers because of your, I would use the word negligence, the onus will lie on you. Secondly, about the e-contracts, all these are valid contracts, whether it is sent on WhatsApp or we sign it without physically. So digital signatures are the name of the game. Future is gone are those days where physically people would be signing through pen, and then there would be forgery happening and somebody had to prove that I never signed it. Digital signatures, even company law, the digital signatures of directors, and then everything is now, India is completely on the digital mode, right? IP addresses, security is an issue, but we are moving towards, you'll realize that nearly all contracts are becoming e-contracts. Even real estate contracts, traditionally where we used to sign, agreement to sell is still on physical paper and stamp paper. But otherwise, even the registries in all the states are now moving towards breaking into the software platforms or breaking into your accounts. So onus lies on us also as consumers in many cases. Like if your passwords are not, if you've kept a very simple password is still okay. But if you have shared your password with other people and then you say, you know, somebody broke into my account, I lost my money, banks will come up and say that is your fault. So they will, so you, as consumers, we have to be very careful and cautious. But yes, you have to reach that level where criminal negligence or negligence has to be proven, and proving these sometimes is quite challenging. And one, yes, in today's day and age, every financial transaction is on the net. Okay, so identity theft is the biggest problem we are all facing. And cyber law is all focusing because the, you know, physical brick and mortar businesses, all, you know, malls and physical shops, everything is shifting to Amazon. Things, even watching movies, everything is so huge volumes and values of businesses are being done on the net, where there is no physical contact, there are no physical signatures required. But laws, to a fair extent, we have the laws, but it is the implementation at various levels, which we have cybercrime units in the police forces, but very few officers understand it. So it is still not reached the masses. FIRs can be lodged by just through a portal on the police cyber crime cell or by sending an email, but it's still not become mainstream as it has become in developed countries. So I think we are getting there, but we need to focus more on that. I will say we have sufficient laws in place. It's not that we need to change our laws. It is just the implementation mechanism. Even our courts, the honorable judges in Supreme Court, High Court, we all have started doing our, you know, e-filings have started, you know, various platforms like Zoom are being used right now for, but it is only restricted to emergency work. But very soon we will bring it into mainstream. US, Singapore, Germany, UK have always been doing that. Nearly 90% of the work can be done, which is great. It's going to save time and money and effort on so many people. It's just that some cross-examination, some evidences, you know, you need to be in front sometimes to cross-examine your witnesses. But otherwise, all the other countries have always been doing it, and India is absolutely on the right track. We have cutting-edge technology in India, and honorable Supreme Court and High Courts have taken into it. Is just that at the grassroots level, at the lower courts level, not all the traditional lawyers, 99% of senior lawyers or lawyers who are above, let's say, at the age of 40, 45, are unfamiliar with, you know, how to operate in this environment. So what we need is more training. And that is the future. And I think we have huge opportunities, and all you youngsters are lucky to be in this era where the younger you are, more technology savvy you are. And if we can club law and technology together, you have a winner. Okay, so focus on technology, focus on your soft skills, think a little bit out of the box, and new opportunities are being created which were not there 5, 7, 10 years back. So, and again, I will my last piece of advice, please push yourselves harder now so that you don't face any difficulties when you graduate. Don't take it easy. Come work with me. And there are many other lawyers who are very hard taskmasters. You will cry when you will do internships with us. Okay, you will literally cry, but I'm telling you, those blood, sweat, and tears will come in useful. Then you will, you know, you will probably thank us later. You'll crib in the initial stages, but it is required. So use time well, and join me for our next session on mentorship. And Dr. Halder, we'd like to have you as a guest speaker also in our mentorship session soon. Okay. So thank you so much. With that, I think I will probably conclude. If anything else, you can extend for a couple of more minutes. Otherwise, from my side, I'm pretty much done.
Sure, sir. On that note, I'd like to thank you on behalf of United World School of Law and Karnataka University for this wonderful, insightful presentation. We learned a lot about contract law and 4C major. We hope we can have more such sessions in future as well. So thank you very much for taking this wonderful webinar. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. And I really enjoy interacting with all the students and your young, bright minds. And in fact, you'll be surprised. I learn a lot from these sessions. That's why I do them, because some of the questions which come up, many times I don't have answers. So I have to go back, look at them, research, and it's a developing field. So there is no one who can say he's an expert. We're all learning all the time. So join me in this learning journey. And definitely, I also look forward to interacting more with all of you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate this. Thank you. Thanks.